can't just say I can only be confident once I achieve something. It's, you got to be confident first, then go out there and achieve it. So I think there's a lot of things that if we just flip the script, the equation kind of balances out the other way.
Quite often when people are giving advice on success, I find they kind of talking about that end point. And I'm like, that's not where it took place. Mm-hmm. It took place right over there where you were afraid of something and you got past it. And the ones that are there right now is where they're stuck. So, you know, in your case, you get seen as what you are today. But if you were to, like, you know, go back, like way back, just like, who's this guy? Dylan. What's your earliest kind of like recollection of, yeah, this is like what I had fun doing. This is what I remember like having joys with, or, you know, facing fears with. What's like your first recollection? Does it go back? Can you remember back to like the playground, the early playground days?
Yeah. You know, I was always competitive in whatever it was that I did. And I always liked sports. So those two things kind of matched up really well. Even like as a kid, like we would go to the park, like with my family, and we would, you know, my parents would bring like a backpack full of different like footballs and basketballs and tennis, and we would just like go through like for a couple hours just going through until we were tired of one. Like we'd throw the football and then we would throw the tennis ball and then we would go play basketball. Like we just did one and the other, and it was just fun, and it was kind of what we did to hang out, and it was what I was kind of just naturally good at too. So I always gravitated towards doing those things.
How did you know you were naturally good at it?
It's just because I really enjoyed it. And then I guess when it comes to like being in school and stuff, you kind of compare yourself to other people, and you can tell, like, especially at a young age, like it's more about basic skills like speed and like strength and technicality, right? So it's like you can tell kind of where you match up around other people. And I guess that's kind of how we kind of navigate where we are kind of in general. It's like through comparisons. So kind of compared to other people, I could tell like, okay, I'm like pretty good at this stuff, and it was really fun, and I'm really competitive. So when you put all those things together, I was like, why would I do anything else really?
Were you competitive first, or were you good at something first?
It's a good question. I'm not sure. I mean, I think I'm competitive in everything, but I think it has to start. Like, I think I have to think that I'm good at it first, right? Because if I'm not good at it, or I don't have a motivation to be that great at it, then I won't be as competitive. Like, for example, like school, I was never competitive with school because I never wanted to be a scholar, right? It didn't mean that I wasn't smart. Like, I was one of those, especially at a young age, like I was one of those, like, you have to apply yourself kids. Like, I got in trouble all the time. Like, in elementary school, I was always in the principal's office. Like, I was always getting in trouble. And like,
for what?
Yeah. So like,
like, what were you doing?
I had an attitude. Like, I would talk back a lot. Like it just like I had a problem with like not authority, but I just
didn't want to be told what to do.
Yeah, I was really like a smart ass too. Like I couldn't keep it in. Like even now to this day, sometimes like I just say things.
Just blurt things.
Yeah, so I got in trouble.
So hold on a second. Like a teacher sitting there going, 1 + 1 is 2, and you're arguing about what are you arguing with a teacher about? What?
It was especially with my friends too. Okay. So it was less about me as an individual being a problem. It was more of the group dynamic. So I had a lot of friends, and we were kind of just always distracted with each other, laughing at things, and kind of in our own kind of world.
Just mischief making.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. It was kind of lighthearted stuff, but obviously really annoying if you're trying to
you're trying to
lead a class.
So,
yeah, always getting in trouble for that. So going back to, I guess, what I was saying before, like with school, like it was one of those things where I had no passions to be like an academic, even though like I was probably smart enough to like, you know, do what I wanted. Like I didn't really kind of struggle with stuff like that. But that's, I think, a case of like I just didn't have a passion for it, so I didn't try as hard. Whereas the things like sports and stuff like that,
or something you had to do, not something you wanted to do.
So when it comes to like competitiveness versus being good at it and which one came first, I think they're kind of just, both elements were there on its own individually, and then when they came together, I think the catalyst was like, do I actually care about this? I think that was the thing that meshed it all together. So it was my ability to see like, do I actually care about this long term and have a goal around it? That's what brought it together.
There's actually a lot to be said about, let's just say you're playing sports, say hockey. You heard of it, hockey IQ, basketball IQ, fighting IQ. There's a lot of intelligence. There's a lot of thought. There's a lot of academic studying to be done when you're fighting, when you're sparring, when you're playing any kind of sport as well. So you're applying a very calculating side to who you are when you're there. You're sizing up somebody. Even when you're doing the stare down with somebody, that's a lot of intelligence involved in that. It's not accidental. It's not thuggery, right? You're actually being very calculated when you're doing that. So you're you're applying it as opposed to putting it down on a piece of paper or keeping it in the theory in the world of theory. So it's interesting.
Yeah.
Is that what they call it?
Yeah, kinesthetic learning.
Here's another cool word.
Yeah, like
She's
doing by
she's
action.
got all these cool words she always comes up with. What does that even mean?
You learn by doing. You're an action-oriented person. You're engaged. You learn best through action and
But when
doing.
you're in school and you're having this feeling that, and that's why I'm curious about it, because you say you were competitive, and we tend to be try to be competitive with the things that we're good at, and we think we're good at something based on comparisons that we make to people around us, right? That's what the competition is, and we figure, okay, that's where we can see ourselves rising. But you did experience at an early age something that you were kind of got a feeling that you were not good at, or there was a signal coming to you because you're getting in trouble for something, the classroom setting, right? And when you were going through that at that time, because I think a lot of people go through that, whether they're new to the country, don't understand the language, or whether, like you just said, they just haven't figured out yet how they're going to apply this. So they look at this and they get a signal that you're really not good at that, and you're ending up in the principal's office for it. But when you're ending up in the principal's office, did you really feel at that point in time, or when you're getting these messages that something's wrong with me? Do you get that? Do you ever get that message that you're being told from, like, you need to fix something about yourself? Did you ever get that feeling ever? Or were you always like the smart ass? No, I'm just fine.
I never thought that there was something wrong with me. I think my approach was like, this doesn't matter as much as everyone thinks it matters. And I think it was more of that kind of mindset of like, why does everybody care so much? Like, why does it care what I got on my 7th grade English paper? Like, it doesn't matter, right? And obviously, like, to a certain extent, it's a good mindset to have, but at the same time, like when it comes to actually trying to get things done in the short term, it's not that helpful.
Well, you may fail the class.
Yeah, and I probably would have, like, if they could fail you in elementary school, I probably would have.
Oh,
like,
really?
Like I probably would have, just because I didn't care. Like I also realized early on that, like, you don't have to do a lot of this stuff. Like, you don't have to do homework. You don't have to, like, I think, like, in grade 7 and 8, like, that's when math textbooks had the answers at the back. And I was like, wait, like, you're just giving this to us for free? Like, the answers? So they're like, do your homework.
It's so interesting for me hearing you say that, because, like, knowing your age and where you would have been, like, a decade ago, I would have been like, man, you gotta fail this kid because he's straight up not doing anything.
So she would work with kids like you in the school system.
He's not doing
That's
it
what you
because
were
he
actually
doesn't.
doing.
I was actually doing that. I'd be the one, like,
Have you guys actually
advocating.
met before ever? You
No.
never met before? Are you sure? Because he might have been one of the kids sent to you.
Yeah, but it's true. Like, you don't have that natural consequence, right? So some kids, like, obviously you can't fail them because they're putting their best effort, and no matter what they do, they just can't get to that level. But there's the kids exactly that sort of mentality. They're not going to do anything.
I would like to say I was actually pretty smart. It just it was the application part. Like, I didn't apply myself at all.
Yeah.
And like I said, I realized, like, what are they gonna do? Fail me? Like, they can't. Like
That's
it
straight
doesn't
up.
matter. And like, you can't. Oh, you don't apply for high school. I mean, like, I ended up actually going to a high school that you had to apply for because it was
you went to a sports
school.
one.
Yes.
But it mattered more, like, the academic side mattered a little bit, but it was more so about,
they wanted
like,
your
them
portfolio.
supporting you, like, through your sport. So it wasn't until I actually got to high school that my whole perspective on school changed, because I was the only one, because it wasn't a like a feeder school. Like, it was a school, it was a public school, but you had to apply to get in. I was the only one from my elementary school that went there. So I went from being...
Which one did you go to?
Bill Crothers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Bill Crothers. Yeah.
So I went from being this, like, popular kid with, like, all of these friends and, like, part of the group and getting in trouble. That was kind of my thing. And going now into a new high school.
And you had to commute, like,
only person. And it was just, like, it was completely different. And I was like, okay, like, I'm here now. Like, I better, make something out of this. It was a totally different experience going from, like, one part to another. And then I realized quickly too, like, now there's incentive to do well in school, because, like, TaeKwonDo is not a professional sport where you can, like, make it and that's it. It's not like basketball where you make the NBA and you're set, or even MMA now where you make the UFC and you're set. Like,
other sports have been monetized differently.
You can turn pro and you can monetize it. With TaeKwonDo, it's an amateur sport, and it always will be an amateur sport. The peak that you can get to is the Olympics, but that's it, right? So at that point, I was like, okay, I have to do something here, else I won't be able to go to university, and then I'll kind of be screwed.
So you were training in Taekwondo from how old? From what age?
5.
Okay, so you were in public school. You were training in Taekwondo. You're starting your career, your path there, ending up in the principal's office from time to time, but still winning a lot overall. You still felt like, hey, I'm the it, right?
No, not
well,
at-
come on. In public school, you just said you went from being this popular guy with a lot of friends to now a different, you were kind of extracted from that environment. So your successes, like what you're seeing, your speed, your strength, all of that stuff was really like, it was amplified to you. You were aware of it, right? In spite of academically still feeling like, hey, I don't have to apply myself here. I'm succeeding enough to go there. And then you go to high school and now you realize that you got to kind of succeed in both ways. Was there like an uh-oh moment there? Like, what did that feel like?
Yeah, it was. It's actually like I didn't actually start doing well in Taekwondo until like later on, until I moved to authentic Taekwondo, because I started at a recreational club. Like most gyms, like most traditional martial arts, like Taekwondo, karate, whatever, they're actually not geared for competitors.
Right.
Like they're just,
It's just
get
for
your
classes?
yeah, get your belts, fitness, whatever. Very, very small margins. Even have like a high performance program, let alone like successful competitors. So that's where I found myself from like when I started up until I moved to authentic in like 2011. So when I moved to the new gym, that was another kind of humbling moment of like, man, I actually don't know anything. Like I had a black belt, but my skill set and my technical ability was like a white belt at that point. Like I really like, we didn't do anything for competition. So as much as I also had that kind of moment going from kind of elementary school to high school of like, okay, things need to change, it was also a moment in my competitive career of like, all right, I also have to kind of dial it up here too. So it kind of came together at the same time of like understanding I need to be fully focused, and they kind of leaned on each other, right? Because especially the amount of school I had to miss and stuff like that. Like if I didn't come up with like a plan to stay organized and be on top of my stuff, it wasn't going to happen. And there's no one holding your hand along the way saying, hey, like, let's do this for you. Like, yeah, I went to a sports school that understood a little bit more, but they weren't going to like do the work
still had
for me. So I
expectations.
had
Which
Sport
of
was
you?
it for that you went to the sports school?
for Taekwondo.
Oh, so Bill Carruthers actually acknowledged that, hey, you're
Yeah.
a Taekwondo.
Yeah, they didn't have a program. Like they didn't
No.
have like a
Right,
team, but
they don't.
they have a high performance athlete like program, so they understand if you have to be away a little bit more or
Yeah,
whatever.
and training. And
Yeah, so it's at that point where kind of I had to kind of step my game up all around, because I'm like, if I'm not doing everything like to the most efficient way possible, like I won't be able to do anything.
But not only that, but you're kind of on your own. Like, because I know some kids that have gone through for their soccer, right? And so, like, I think you can't play for the Crothers soccer team if you play outside or something like that, right? The sport you excel in, you can't play for the school team in or something.
I think so.
But-
Yeah. See, I didn't have to deal with that because there was no
because you had no one
team.
else.
Yeah.
But I know from like working with those teens, there's a competitiveness and a camaraderie that happens amongst them that they just, you know, that strive to help. And then they also will rally around academics, right? And like I saw them like just like help each other with like what they had going on and helping each other organize. But you wouldn't have had that niche built in because your sport was so. You probably were the only student that was in Taekwondo in the school, right?
Yeah, it was isolating. Like it was really isolating, and especially just the shock from, like I said, going from one system to another. Yeah, it was the only one that was like that. And you know, Taekwondo, maybe now like people can kind of picture what it is, but I mean, even then, like no one really knew like what that even was.
Yeah.
You know, it's not boxing, it's not jiu-jitsu, it's not MMA. It's kind of its own thing. And there was the element of, you know, being like the only one that did that, and then there was the other elements that are just surrounded by the sport itself, which were things like cutting weight and missing school and other things that are so isolating on its
your
own.
weigh-in and stuff.
Yeah, like I would have to lose like 20 to 22 pounds like per tournament, and we were competing like every month or 2 months. So I was basically just always killing myself, and I had to walk around school with like this 4-liter jug of water because I had to like water load all the time. So I for sure looked like this weirdo who was just carrying a jug of water, walking around. Like it was an isolating experience.
And just not a weirdo anywhere. A weirdo in high school. Is
right?
It's a very
It's just
different
like
environment.
amplify it. Why don't
Yeah,
we?
so it was like I felt something. It feels like, you know, you can be surrounded by all these people, but you're really just in
You're
your
alone.
own little pocket. And it forced me to do a lot of kind of like, you know, I didn't have a lot of friends to bounce things off of. I had my teammates, and that really was it. You know, like you have people you're cordial with in school and friends you kind of eat lunch with. But even at that point, I would, because like I was mentioning before of how I had to get really organized to succeed in everything, like I would basically like eat lunch as fast as I could so I can go to the library, get whatever homework done that I had from the classes before, and then at the end of like the school day, we had like an extra period where you could do homework, but most people just kind of hung out and talked. I had to like do more homework there too because I didn't really have time at home. Like we were training 3 times a day.
Yeah.
So I had no time to do my work. So I had to exactly.
So
like,
did you ever think you couldn't do it?
So the thing with me is that I always felt like I had this potential inside of me that just wasn't being tapped into, right? Like I said before, I started at a very recreational gym.
Right.
Nothing was based around competing. I think we would spar once a year, maybe.
Wow.
And I was begging every class. I would go to the instructor, can we spar? Can we spar? And then he'd ask the room, right? Do you guys want to spar? And they're like, no.
Yeah.
Right? Because when
really?
we did, it was like there was no rules. It was like, well, what do you think is going to happen when you don't train these kids? And then once a year, it was like nuts. Like there was one session I remember where there was like no rules and I like choked a kid out. Yeah. And there's no choking in Taekwondo. It's all kicks and punches. It was like MMA style. And it's just like,
just a free for all.
Yeah. And like, but that's the dynamic it was. So I always felt like it. And I went to one tournament. So there was a time where I was begging, right? Like, where are the tournaments? Like I heard that it was a thing. I'm like, tell me where it is. I'll go. So finally, they put up a poster in the gym for, like a local tournament. And I was so excited, right? And I went there with my family. It was this big event. But no one was there, like, from my team. Like, there was no coaches. There was none of my teammates.
Sure.
Yeah, there was nobody there that I recognized. And they just, I guess, left me there. And they figured, whatever. So my dad, who now he trains and he's a black belt, but at the time he wasn't. He didn't do this at all then. No, he had to sit in the coaching chair and coach me with, like, his camera, like, between his legs, trying to record me at the same time. Aww. And it was, like... At that moment, I think it could have been a fork in the road of like, how do I respond to that, right? Like, I was so excited about it, and it was such a letdown in terms of like not having support. But instead of being disappointed by that and saying, well, no one's going to support me, this sucks.
Why were you expecting support?
Because they put the poster up. I at least expected the coach to show up. You know what I mean? Like, I thought that was the bare minimum. Like, if you're going to tell me that we're going, like, we're going to go. Like, you don't have to be good. I didn't expect them to be amazing at it, but I figured like they'd be there. Like I'd never been to anything.
To enjoy
like
the experience.
Yeah, it's like if you play for a basketball team, you expect the coach to show up like for your game, right? So at that point, I realized like, okay, but I had a lot of fun still. So I was like, if I can have fun and have it be like the worst situation ever, like imagine if it wasn't. Like imagine it was better. And I always felt like I have this thing inside me that I could be really good at this. And I felt so frustrated that I just wasn't being tapped into. And that was a moment where I was like, well, what do I do? Was it like a gut
instinct? Like you just had this knowing?
Yeah, I was like, what do I do? Do I quit? Because I hated doing the patterns at that point. I hated doing all the other stuff. I didn't want to go anymore. And for me, that was a foreign feeling because since I was 5, I was always doing it. And at this point, it was like 2010, 2011. I was like 11, 12 years old. And it was my first time ever feeling like maybe I don't want to do this, right? So I was like, I have to make a change.
So them not coming to the tournament or you're not doing as well as you wanted, what do you think triggered your feeling of wanting to quit?
It was the fact that I just wasn't getting. I realized that like I made a decision early on. I think I was like 10. I was like, I want to spar. Like that's what I loved doing. Right. And we just weren't doing it. So it was like, how many times can I go to class and be disappointed? I always ask, can we do this? Can we?
And they're like, control over.
Yeah, I was like, how many times am I going to show up to this class and be disappointed that we're not doing anything competitive? And I was like, well, is this just what it's going to be? Yeah. Because there's also like that loyalty complex. Like I don't want to leave. I've learned a lot. But it's like, what are we going to do? So I was really, really lucky that the master that led that gym, me and my family kept asking, could we make a program? Could we do more sparring? And he did something that was very humble. And I don't think other people in his position would have done that. And what he said was, we just don't have the program that you're looking for. Like what you want out of this, we just can't give you. So what he did is he actually gave me a list of like because he was very connected in the space. He gave me a list of like all the different gyms that he knew that competed well. He said, go ahead. Check them out. Exactly. So in that moment, that was huge because if he had said to me, I don't feel comfortable with you, whatever, we'll make it work. I would have tried to make it work. But that's the
relationship, right? He saw like, it's like that stepping stone that he took you as far as you could go.
There's also the difference there, right there, between either you or you and your father or you and your family, is that when a lot of times we don't get the result we wanted, when we're frustrated, we stop right there.
Yeah. Don't look for a solution.
You guys kept on pushing. What's that called? Persistence. It's interesting. He says he went to a school where there wasn't a lot of, focus on sparring, but maybe that's what also gave you that feeling that you're you've got greater potential than this. If there was a lot of sparring there and you weren't yet developed and you hadn't achieved that success or like lack of success, you wouldn't have had that desire. Like, sometimes not getting what you want fuels you even more to go get it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's knowing what you don't want.
And then knowing what you don't want.
Right?
I think I had like a false sense of confidence maybe because
There it is.
because I was
Fake it till you make it psychology,
because
right?
like when we would spar like the once a year or whatever, like
Yeah.
it wasn't, and I was doing well. Like, I mean, obviously, like I was the big fish in the tiniest pond ever.
Yeah.
So like when you throw in a bunch of people with no skills, like my aggression took over my, and I always judged, like I always made people cry. Like that's how I knew I was doing something right, because we would spar and I would make people
So you don't
cry.
call yourself the bully then at that point?
Yeah.
Because it was
not a
within the
bully
rules,
type.
it was
Yeah,
within the rules.
it was
set.
inside the rules.
I wasn't telling people they were ugly and that's why they were
Yeah.
crying.
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
doing it within the
Yeah.
framework
The
of
context.
and they,
Sure.
but that's obviously why no one wanted to spar anymore, because it was too intense. But for
Yeah.
me, I was like, that's what made me realize like I have something.
Yes.
It's not formed in a way that's like conducive to me being really, really successful, like as it stands, but I have something that tells me I'm good at this and I love doing it. I just wanted to be in a position where someone could take those kind of raw tools and build it into something that was like what it should be later on. So I threw the list. I didn't go anywhere else.
Yeah.
I stayed there.
Yeah.
And that was,
Yeah.
January of 2011. And, the rest is history. I mean, I watched my first week there. There was like the high performance team they had was a bunch of people my age, and they were all preparing to go to nationals, right? So nationals that year was in Winnipeg. And same thing. I had another moment of like, whoa. I was like, you guys are like flying together, like on a plane. Like you're going to go compete, like, and represent Team Ontario. They had like a Team Ontario cheer, and I was like, oh my! Like I was like, I have to do this. Like,
Yeah.
this is like to me they seem like superstars, And I was like, I want that, and I realized, like, okay, when's the next one? And like the next nationals was going to be like the following January. I'm like, I don't care
Yeah,
what
just
it
zone
takes.
in.
I want that thing.
So what's interesting? Because our experience with Authentic was the same. Like we went there and then we just didn't go anywhere else.
Yeah.
It just in a little while you realize it. But what's interesting to me here is that you felt that way you were able to identify that that's a high caliber, high potential actualization opportunity because you knew what a low potential actualization opportunity looks like.
Mm-hmm. And what I'm hearing when he's saying that is I hear like this, sometimes it's a concept of like you're only in competition with the version of yourself from yesterday, right? Like that's it. It's always just an internal journey. And like you could be in that environment with other people and like you said, you're the worst, but it doesn't matter because you're going to be better than you were yesterday, or maybe you'll slip back. But that's always your kind of bouncing off point is checking in with yourself, right? Like
You know what else is interesting with you, Dylan, is that, a lot of times people, they aspire to be at the front of the crowd, at the top of the game, the best in the group. But what you're saying is that when you found yourself at the top of the group, you found like yourself frustrated because you really couldn't go any further. You're already the furthest. Mm-hmm. I think that's great for you to actually acknowledge that being held back is often like, and not getting what you want right away, getting that, what is it called? That not instant gratification, but if it was just so, consecutive, succeed, where would be the fight? Where would be the appreciation?
Yeah, and that's why like I've never looked back and wished I had done it differently, right? Like I think someone in my position could have been like, man, if only I had been at Authentic when I first started, like all these other kids, right?
Right.
I'm at I wasted 7 years. I just never thought that way because, I'm the type of person who thinks everything happens for a reason, right? I'm like,
When you were
being at that
12, you thought
place-
this. Everything happens for a reason.
Yeah, I'm like,
Seriously.
being at that place,
I know, right?
being at that place forced me to develop other skills, right? Like the kind of martial arts, those tenets of martial arts, right? The respect, the discipline, kind of that. It was a very hardcore traditional place where they would yell at you, they would like hit you sometimes and stuff like that. And obviously Authentic is like not that type of place, or at least not now. But like I kind of needed that too. So I knew like, okay, that first chapter is what developed like that grit and that like hustle and that like real kind of those raw things that I needed to then take into a more technical club and shine there. And maybe I thought too, like maybe if I had started at a place where it was just all technical, I would have been really technically great, but missing some of that like
Maybe you didn't have that fire for your sparring
Yeah,
that would have came
exactly.
because from being held back.
exactly.
For so
And that's
long.
why I always I never regretted like the way that it went, even though there were definitely times where I was like, man, like how good could I be if I'd started there from the beginning? It was like, no, I developed a different skill set.
Yeah.
Maybe not technically, but like just
transferable.
Yeah, behaviorally, psychologically, just like lifestyle wise, from being in a hardcore, tough, traditional martial arts gym that I can then take as kind of the blueprint, impose onto this new place, and kind of have the best of both worlds. So I kind of reframed it as like, this actually puts me in a better position than at a disadvantage, and I tried to roll with that.
Were there moments there though where you were like, I am at a disadvantage? Honestly, did you ever feel?
It sucked. Just because I understood where I was at doesn't mean it didn't suck. Like I was the worst one there. Like
Because in Taekwondo, like a lot of these kids that you're up against when you go to Ontario and National, they've been training for many, many years.
Yeah, no,
they didn't have to
for
drop.
sure.
They
Did
didn't
you
have
lose
to drop
like when
20
you
pounds.
first started? Like
a lot. Like I was lucky to be, like I said, like with a group that was very, very, very competitive. Like even my main training partner, Gianluca, like we're the same age, but he's always been much bigger than me, like just size wise. And every time we would do drills, he would hit me so hard I would get winded, right?
Yeah.
Like, but every day in class, like it could be demoralizing sometimes because I was a smaller kid. Like, you know, I think
does that
like
drive you to get more technical? Like then, because then he has
it was just like, okay, this is what it is. And like
But hold on, like right there, you know, you're saying it was demoralizing.
Yeah.
So you did have moments there. You weren't just, okay, I got to reframe. I'm going to do this. Here's the upside.
It was just like, where am I going to go? You know, like, am I going to go with someone that's lighter because it's easier for me? Or do I go with this guy who's going to push me hard? And then when I go into the ring, what's this guy going to do to me? We're the same weight. We're the same height. We're the same whatever.
So if you have a sparring partner, you're training that's like harder.
Yeah, I learned to appreciate nervousness in a way, because if you can be nervous in the gym, it prepares you for that feeling of being in the ring itself, right? If you get too complacent and it becomes too friendly and you lose that edge in the gym, when you feel nervous at the competition, because you always do, no matter how prepared you are, it's going to be foreign, right? So what I learned, especially by being the worst one there against people that always not only nervous, but to the point of being scared. Like I was scared of getting hurt. So when you're in that
moment, like you're in that moment of, because I have this with like public speaking, which is funny that I do this, right? But it's so ironic, right? The thing I hate the most, I do. The scary part, right? It's scary. It's like you always go to where it's scary. So like when you're in that space and you're about to compete and you're, you know, like I know for me, I feel like I'm going to vomit a lot of times, and then I have to like do this kind of activity with myself to get myself locked in. So like how do you go through that space? Because it's a really fine line from like dropping out in a panic attack or vomiting or just like peace out, I'm leaving, or you can shift gears and go switch the pendulum the other way and take it to a different level. Yeah. And then kind of like capitalize or like harness that energy the same way it would have dysregulated you to like lock down and freeze. You're harnessing it to then elevate you to then mobilize into action. So like, what does that process look like for you? Because I think that's where people trip, right? And we fall and we get stuck, right? Like that's the moment.
You talk about like, you know, when you're there for the first time, right? Or the second, whatever, when you're scared, when you're nervous, you don't come up with that solution then and there. What did you do then and there when you're scared? Yeah. What did you do?
I don't know. I guess
What did it feel like? Because Dylan never gets scared, never looks nervous. Yeah. He's staring people down. That's all I know about him. Right? No, you actually got scared. So
I might be harnessing that.
It might be harder for you.
My first tournament, we had lined up, and it was my first tournament with Authentic. And they did they laid out the division, and there was like 5 of us. There was like an odd number. And they were basically saying, okay, someone has to get a bye, right? Like, someone has to kind of skip the first round and get the bye. And they're going down the list, and I was last because I was the shortest, right? Because I was always small. Like, up, I think like grade 7, 8, I was like 5'4".
Yeah, it's such and everyone grows at different rates pounds, then, yeah.
So I was small, and I was at the end of the line. So I was like, oh man, I was like, someone does whoever they ask first is going to take the bye. Like, I thought, obviously, right? The first guy's like, I want to fight. Second guy, I want to fight. And I'm like, whoa, it gets to me. Like, no one wanted the bye. I'm like, I'll take the bye.
Yeah.
I was like, this is like a free win, like to get closer in the tournament. So I think that also maybe violates what people would think about me coming at it from like a place of being mentally tough and being confident. But in that moment, I'm like, I'll take the bye. Like, why would I not get a free win?
Yeah.
So I went to everyone was in the crowd and everyone was confused as to like what they're asking. And my parents were in the stands. I was like, I got the bye. And I was like, so
It's a win.
Yeah.
Technically.
So like that was kind of where I was at. And then I just like, I had fun with it. Again, it was nerve wracking, but I loved competing, and like I loved having now Master Farah behind me who could coach me and like really start to see, even from my first tournament, I felt such a difference in my abilities, and like having a little bit of progress and seeing the difference between the first ever tournament I did and, you know, the first one with Authentic. And I was just like, I just loved to compete, and I treated every event like it was like the Olympics. Like I over intensified it to the point where I would give myself migraines afterwards.
What was your headspace like when you'd be conquering that fear?
I was just like, I don't even know if in the moment it was a fear thing. It was just like, this is what I'm here to do. Like, you know,
Hold on a sec, Dylan.
Yeah.
You got the bye.
Yeah.
You said you were afraid and scared. You got the bye, so you really never had to face it.
I
Then you went
wasn't.
to your first
Yeah,
fight.
true that, yeah.
Let's go. Like, I'm still didn't hear the answer to the question.
Yeah.
So you go to the first fight after getting the bye. So that's
So now you
maybe
have a
even
win.
harder because
Yeah.
you didn't actually feel the sweat from the first fight.
Yeah.
You're not even warmed up. This guy's already had a fight.
Yeah.
He won a fight. You kind of didn't win a fight. You know this going into your first fight.
Yeah.
So does
Right?
it go,
That's
does this
gotta
happen
weigh-
in the same
that's
day?
gotta
Like you
weigh
have
in
the
on
bye,
you.
then you
Like
go to
within the
another
same
level,
hour.
right?
Yeah.
It's all within the same day. Okay.
Yeah, it's within like minutes.
Yeah. So I didn't take the bye because I was scared of fighting. I took the bye because
Of
common
course.
sense told me like that's how
Sure.
you get
That's a
closer
win.
to the
Right,
win.
but what I'm saying is that kind of is a disadvantage sometimes because you haven't fought yet.
Yeah.
This guy's
Your
already-
body's not
This
warm.
person's had a real
I wasn't
win.
smart enough to think that yet.
Oh, okay. So naivety helps.
I didn't think about the warm up fight. I just thought, okay, one round
I'm on to
closer.
the next level.
Yeah, like it has to be better. Like the
Right.
one more whatever. So yeah, like I remember fighting, and I think that tournament I came second. So I won my first fight.
Right.
And then I
But
think
that was your very, very first
yeah,
fight.
it was my very first one
and
with
there was
Authentic.
nervousness. That's what I'm trying to understand. Is that there was? Do you remember there being the sense of nervousness? Do you remember anything about that?
At that age and at a point when you're so new at something, you kind of get to a place where you have all this like heightened sensations, but when
You were
it
just
when it
excited.
starts, you kind of block everything out. Like when the referee says go,
That's what you did.
yeah,
But that's
were
what
just
not
in the
wait,
fight?
you did that. That not everyone does that. I think that's what the point
guess-
is.
yeah, I guess I just
yeah,
blocked
like
it
what
out,
you
like-
did there could shut
Well,
someone down, or
There's
like
there's something I'm wondering about really
There's
though,
a
Dylan, is that you were there. The last time you were in something like this that you described was when there was no coach, and you were feeling, you know, like a little bit deserted. That's what I think really like the success lies, right? That you sought, you persisted on finding and building your team, building the people around you. When you saw them, you recognized it. You put in a lot of time to prepare to get there, and then when you got there, still having the presence of the support around you. I noticed that to be a constant common denominator.
the support is where it
we
is.
need it.
Yeah.
And a lot of times people say like, I feel alone. You felt alone, but you didn't just stay alone. You said, hey, I feel alone, so I'm going to go get somebody. You didn't stay that way. You didn't wallow in it, right? And then you kept going. What I love about this story that you tell is that you won the first fight that you actually went into with Master Farah behind you, but you didn't go all the way. And I love that part about it. So when you're in your final fight, you're already like expecting, yeah, I'm achieving the success. I'm achieving the success. You go into that last fight that you say you lost. I want to talk about that a little, if that's okay with you. You obviously remember it. You felt like you're ready to win. You can take this guy. Did you have, when you looked at your opponent, the one that you lost in the finals, did you have a feeling that this guy's like way better than me, or what did you feel before going that? Was there anything different at the beginning versus the other fights?
I knew that he was going to be good. Obviously, like you can't help
You already
but watch
noticed
them
him.
compete, right? Like you
Yeah,
see,
you wanna
you're like,
suss them
how are
out.
they doing? So I knew that he was going to be very kind of technically good, and he was kind of the other side of the spectrum from me, where I came in with like all grit, no technique. He was very technical, but didn't have as much of kind of that fire. So I figured, you know what? I can overwhelm him. I can overpower him. Like I've been kind of successful all day, and it was actually a very close fight. I think I lost it within the last like 30 seconds or the last minute. Like I kind of had that problem like for the first little bit of my career. Like I just didn't know how to handle being ahead sometimes, and I also didn't like. I got tired by the end of it. Like I couldn't.
Yourself.
Yeah, I couldn't manage like all the kind of complex parts of competing at a high level that you kind of need to. So like I was like winning early on. I got ahead of myself. Like, oh, okay, I'm gonna do this, and then before you know it, you don't. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
So I lost, and I was like obviously so upset by it because like, man, like I came all this way, whatever. Silver never feels as good. Like that first experience for that first tournament, you can actually extend that into my first like almost year. Like it was the same thing every time because we would compete like every month in a different
Like the
place.
same lesson keeps coming back
Every time.
Yeah.
It would, like I didn't win at all. I always came second or third or something like that. I just couldn't get over that final
Being held
part.
back again.
Yeah, you're held back.
I just couldn't get to that final part. And I remember there was a big tournament. So that tournament that I mentioned was in March. I had started in January. And then August of that same year was provincials. And provincials was like a big deal because it was like a qualifier for nationals or whatever. It was the first like big event. And I was nervous for it. And I remember Master Farah saying too, like, don't worry. Like one day, you know, provincials are going to feel like a normal tournament. Nationals are going to feel like any other day. And I thought he was full of shit. I'm like, no way.
Yeah.
I'm like, you're just lying to me. Like, there's no way that I'm ever going to treat this
so
like
you're
a
not
regular
buying in.
tournament.
You're not
No.
drinking the Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
No. I'm like, you're just trying to say that. So, but I had felt like, how am I leading up to that? I'm like, how am I going to win the provincials if I haven't even won
He's giving you a mindset
a local
already.
tournament? Like, how's this going to happen? So I was fortunate enough. There was one last tournament before provincials in Niagara in like June or July, and I finally went out there and I won it. And that was my first local tournament that I won in Niagara, and that's what gave me the confidence of like, all right, I finally got over that hurdle. Here comes provincials, which is going to be my biggest kind of challenge yet. But because I had proven to myself that I could do it, like I think there's a difference between thinking you can do something and knowing you can do something. That was the moment where it went from I think I can do this to I know I can because I won that local tournament, and then it kind of set the catalyst for the success I had
Took
later
that vigor to another
Exactly,
place.
because I ended up then winning provincials, winning nationals that same year, and just it kind of started from there. So I think that was an important moment for me to prove like, yeah, I can do this. I'm not just a silver medalist or a bronze medalist. Like I can.
And
get
this is like
goals.
the second time you've taken like your skills, gone into a bigger pond, if you will, and be like, oh man, this is crazy. I can't make it. And then you
See, there's that feeling again,
Right?
Like you feel like, do you ever feel like you were in a rut, like second place, third place, second place, third place? What do I got to do?
Yeah.
Again, a lot of people, I feel, get stuck there.
Yeah.
And so,
Even though it's still a great place to be in,
but
right?
from what
But
you're
like-
saying, yeah, exactly.
But in your head, you don't
beat
think it
everybody
is.
else
Yeah.
except one.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Like, that's
Really,
pretty
how
phenomenal.
bad is that? But for you didn't have like, I don't know if you're the same, but I take away my second place medals and third place and they're like in the garbage. I only want the first place medals. So I understand when you say that, but nothing really changed except one thing. I noticed is that you were just persistent.
Yeah.
There wasn't like, you had Master Farah there, but this time you had Master Farah and you were still not, like you had hit another, I'll call another ceiling and you want to break through that. But in order to break through that, really nothing else really changed in you other than just persisting. Would you say? Or was there something else?
Yeah, I that's exactly it. I mean, I knew that like
because you had everything.
Everything I have is like in me.
Yeah.
I just have to make it happen. I have to get there. And it's this mindset of like, no one's going to do it for me.
Yeah.
Right? People will help, but no one's going to hold your hand and walk you through it. Nobody's going to be there in the ring physically with me fighting this guy. Like, no one's going to do it for me. I have to do this for myself. And if I want the things that I want out of this, I'm in an environment where it's conducive to success for the first time. Like, let me make something happen with this. And like I said, that frustration was around, I have something in me that I just want like a blueprint to kind of map this out in the right way. I'm like, okay, I finally have this blueprint. If I can just stick to this process, like I'll get there at some point. And that's why I never felt like maybe I should quit or maybe this isn't for me. It's just I was like, okay, I'm on the right path, whether it takes me a year, 2 years, whatever. Like I at least know that I'm like with the right group, doing the right things. With time, it'll come, but no one's going to do it for me. I have to be the one that's in the driver's seat this whole time.
So you obviously now this is like at how old were you? Like 14?
This was still 2011, so this was still.
This is all in the
12,
first year,
so, yeah.
right?
I was like grade
so
7.
You start like really accelerating now.
It was very quick,
you're,
yeah.
You're achieving this like rapid growth, right? Rapid success.
Yeah.
And then you go to nationals. You went, competed in provincials. You went to nationals, and it felt like you start noticing your rate of acceleration, right? So you're really starting to compete. You're really starting to win. I remember this guy. One of the last tournaments I think I saw you compete in that I was there. You, this guy, he would talk about playing mind games with people. He's winning just easily. Even the last fighter that he's fighting, I watched it. The guy was taller than him, bigger than him, and he talks about being smaller, right? He's like one of those kind of larger than life kind of people, right? So he walks in, and they're looking for him. I remember Rob was the actual announcer. Your father was the announcer at the tournament too. So he's like, they're calling out Dylan to the last fight. Now, usually, you should be ready.
You should be there,
everything.
right?
You know what this guy does? Oops. He doesn't come out. And I wanted to ask you about this.
Move?
I totally must have been a power move.
Deliberate?
So he's sitting there, and the other guy is just like,
accidental,
everyone's waiting for Dylan to show up, and they're like, I'm like, I would be worried about being disqualified, doing all this.
Yeah, I have anxiety about being
So
late
get out
for
there,
anything.
be early, be prepared, right? Look like you're organized. That's the message you want to send to the other side. Where's Dylan? Nobody knows where Dylan is. And then he does this little walk in, and he comes in, and I'm like, interesting. He's got everybody. Tell me
Everybody
when you were
waiting
doing that.
for you.
By
Yeah.
that time, you'd already developed all of this, the mind game.
So was that deliberate? Like, was that deliberate? Them looking for
It was
you?
totally deliberate.
Yeah, I want people to be on my time.
Yeah.
I want
Oh my
people to
God, I
kind of.
love
He's gone from like this guy to that guy now.
Yeah, like you understand.
And you were
'cause
14 doing this?
No, this was
No,
later.
it was just like-
This was maybe 2016, so
Yeah,
it was
it
maybe
was-
18 later. This was kind of at the end.
This,
Yeah.
I realized like, okay, like everyone has a routine and everyone has an expectation, right?
Yeah.
The way that you visualize your expectation is, you go in, the opponent comes in, whatever. So anything you can do to violate someone's expectation and
Yes.
make it go slightly different than they planned is always going to be better for you. So
100%.
this guy, imagine him walking out, then me walking out.
the surprise.
Yeah, what he didn't imagine is now this extra, 3 minutes of just standing there,
Yeah.
which sucks. Like he did
Yeah.
his warm up in the
'Cause he's-
back.
yeah.
He was ready.
He's thinking about that.
And then you're
for
standing
sure.
there for even 2 or 3 minutes, like kind of, what do I do? That's kind of where I'm like, all right, that's my time to go in.
Now he's in his head.
And I was always very deliberate with like my planning because that was an event where they were framing it as like a Ontario versus Quebec event.
Oh, yeah.
And every fight they had only one ring in the center. Everyone in the
Where
stadium
was the fight?
watching. This was in Toronto.
Okay, so this person was on your home
Yeah.
kind of turf. If
So
you
they
will.
had an Ontario versus Quebec, but the thing was, Quebec won every single fight.
They were doing all right.
It was like
Up
there
to
were
this point.
4. I think I was the last one, and so I've always done a good job of putting myself into the place of the opponent, thinking like, what is this guy thinking? And I was like,
Right.
this guy's thinking that he just. The pressure's on him again. This is kind of reframing, but in a way that made me feel more confident. Pressure's on him. He has to close this out. If they kind of went 1-1 lost 1-1 lost 1, he can just go out there and do what he wants.
But now this
They have won
seals the deal.
every single time. It's on him
Yeah.
to close this out and make it a clean sweep. And I was excited. I'm like, I can't wait to ruin this guy's day.
Yeah.
I can't
Wow.
wait to go out there and show him very quickly that these fights aren't going to be like the ones that he just watched. I can't wait to go out there and show him what it's like to fight me and why if anybody else that had fought on those last 3 fights had to fight me, it wouldn't have been a clean sweep the way it was. So I was like, I'm going to do this on my time. I'm going to let him think that, he's confident, he's rolling into this. He has
got the
support of
advantage.
Quebec. Yeah, show him what it's like to wait for me and make it on my time. And from the beginning of the fight, I set the tone as to like, hey man, like this isn't what you think it's going to be. Congratulations to your teammates for winning, but unfortunately, you're going to be the one that has to go home like without that medal. And
So you find your motivation.
Yeah.
No matter what the situation is.
Yeah.
That's not reframing, man. That's like, like really,
You're making a choice.
yeah, using the energies.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I have another
It's
You're
story
actually
like that.
harnessing it.
converting
You're
the
harnessing
I have
it.
another story like that too, if you guys want to hear it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So U.S. Open is one of the biggest tournaments that there is, internationally.
Where was this? Which
This
city?
one was in Vegas.
Okay.
Oh no, first one was in Vegas. This one's in Orlando.
Okay.
Orlando. To win this tournament is like a really big deal because it's again one of the biggest. Like people come in from everywhere, China, Russia, whatever. And I'd won it in 2014. And like for me, that was like the biggest thing I'd ever done. And this is 2015 now, coming back and kind of defending.
So Vegas
that.
was first, and then
Vegas
Orlando.
was first, then it was Orlando, same tournament. And I kind of had that pressure of like defending this.
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
championship. But no one does it. Like no one wins it back to back. So I remember I had fought well, but I had close fights. Like it's tournament style. There was probably 40 people in the division, and every fight that I fought was tough. Right? It was like one person then the next, and I was winning these fights, but it wasn't easy by any means. The guy who so I make it to the finals. I fight, 4 people from 4 different countries. I finally make it to the finals after a really tough match against the Russian national team guy, who I kind of went in there thinking like, I don't know if I can beat this guy. Like he was.
So you
really
knew
good.
some of them.
just because you watch them.
Well, you watch them
at the later part,
yeah.
Got it.
You see who's on your side of the tree, where does it
Yeah.
match up, and you kind of watch. So going
people are
into the
watching.
finals now, the guy who I had to fight. So in Taekwondo, there's a rule where there's like a mercy rule, kind of like if you're up, and it's different now. I don't know what the numbers are, but at the time, like if you were up by like 12 points by the end of round 2, they wave it off. It's
And
like
that's you've won. That's
done.
it.
It's like a mercy rule. Like you win by whatever.
Just yeah.
This guy who I had to fight in the finals, every single fight he had won by that mercy rule. Every single fight.
So he was just taking them down.
This
the
sounds like
first
a
one or
Rocky
two
movie.
rounds,
Yeah,
right?
every fight. And there's me.
I know, right?
Ivan
And he's the
Drago.
Russian.
That's
and
what I'm
he's
saying.
No, this was you had the
I
I
just
beat the
visualized
Russian.
Ivan Drago.
I got you. I'm
I
back.
just visualized
This
that.
guy was in the finals. This guy was American. It was the Russian guy I had to face in the semis.
Right.
So anyway, this guy at every single fight he had crushed these guys. And then there's me who like obviously like I was winning, but it was by close margins sometimes, like maybe 2 or 3 points. I actively thought in the moment, which way do I go? Do I think how do I beat this guy on, on paper? There's no reason why I should win this. But I thought, no, this is my advantage here. I've been facing adversity all day. I've been having to fight through the hardest fights I've ever fought all day. This guy's just next on my list. He hasn't had that.
Yeah.
I'm going to show him from the very first round, he's going to notice that he can't walk through me. And the moment he realizes that he can't walk through me,
It's gonna stumble
there's
him.
going to be something in his head that goes, oh. So the way I approached fights was I always thought there's 2 ways to win
That's
a fight.
the emotion, right?
Yeah, there's 2 ways
Yeah.
to win a fight. You impose your will, you impose your game plan, and you dominate them that way. And, or
Because that's what he's thinking.
exactly, you get your opponent to self-destruct. And that was always my take, is if you can bring those 2 things together, that's how you win. So I tried to beat my opponents, not just from what I did to them physically, but I tried to make them crumble internally as well. And then the moment you realize that someone's kind of self-destructing internally, that's when you can pick them apart. So that
Yeah.
was my strategy of how am I going to make him self-destruct? I'm going to make him realize early on that this isn't going to be easy. So I would do this. It's funny, I actually do this now for the clients that I have because I'm just really good at it. But I would watch game tape all the time, like on all the different opponents that I either have had or I could have. And I would do that like in school when everyone else was kind of doing their homework. If I was doing my homework early, I'd open my computer and just game
just
plan and
watch
just
it.
have a notepad open and I would watch it 100 times. And one time I would write down how many times did they use their right leg. Then I would watch it again.
Yeah.
How many times left leg. Then I would watch it again. And then I got
called
to a
homework,
point.
baby.
Yeah. So I got to
He
a
actually
point.
started doing it finally.
Yeah.
There you go.
So I get to a point where I realized,
You
like,
do all the
okay,
matrix.
There's a lot of homework involved.
there's more than just kicks and punches. So I got to a point where I was breaking them down behaviorally too, and I would
Yeah.
see
Yeah.
what does this
You study.
person look like when they're put under pressure? How do they respond to that? What is their kind of tick? Right? Do they smile? Do they clap their hands?
Right.
Do they say something? And I would try to look and break people down kind of psychologically and see what are their cues for when they're
nonverbal,
stressed
yeah.
or when they're put in an uncomfortable situation. And I would try to get that out of them, and then when I saw it is when I knew, like, all right, we're there. So if
What
I,
were you seeing?
I would see just things like body language.
Yeah,
too,
right.
Like when
look in
someone's
the eye.
winning,
Yeah.
you can tell like their chest is straight,
Right.
they're energized, they're good to go. And when you can kind of mute someone
their
a little
posture
bit,
drops.
So you know what often
put them
happens, I
down.
find, though? If you didn't do that, can you imagine? Can you imagine if you did not do that studying, you would not be able to read the cues, which means you would not even be able to tell when the tide was shifting in your favor anymore.
Right.
What would that do to your chances to victory?
That's what took me from a place of being the worst one in the gym to the best one, not only in the gym, but in the country, and one of the best in the world, was because I knew I have to do the things that nobody else is doing, and that's the only way that I can close this gap and set myself up for success.
So you see, there's like he goes from desiring to the feeling of deserving. What do you say to somebody who's just still stuck in that space, who really doesn't understand the why not me part?
Yeah.
What do you say to that?
I think a lot of people struggle with feeling like, if I haven't proven to myself that I can be successful, like, how can I have a right to be confident, right? There's this
Right.
feeling of like, how can I be this way if I haven't earned it, right?
Right.
And that's why I think a lot of people get stuck with like being insecure, right?
Yeah.
It's like, I haven't proven it. And the way I like to kind of flip things sometimes, and instead of saying, how can I be confident if I haven't been successful first? It's like, well, how can you be successful if you're not confident first?
Right.
There it
Flipping the
is.
script and trying to do it that way, where it's like, it doesn't matter whether you're a champion or whether you've never won. You need to walk in, and if it's a training example, you need to walk into training with your chest out, with your head held high, with the willingness to learn. Because if you walk in there low energy, you're like, I don't want to waste these people's time, I'm not good enough, let me win first and then I'll be able to be confident. You can't. It's like you're always going to be behind. So that's what I had to do too, is realize that like I can't wait until I'm successful to command that in the gym. Like, I need to kind of fake it till you make it first, and I'm gonna walk in with
I was just going to ask you that.
Yeah.
What's the difference between being confident before you win versus faking it till you're making it?
It was that.
Because that faking it, just the word itself,
Yeah.
doesn't really resonate with me or a lot of people.
Yeah.
So what's the difference between being confident and faking?
Like, it's a lot of the time, like, believe it or not, it just, like, by body language, a lot comes, it makes it more real. So it, it's called faking until you make it. But I mean,
But when
listen,
you position yourself
Yeah.
physically, there's a whole book called
Exactly.
Humanual. Oops, it's about like those types of things and how we position ourselves in a certain physicality, and it shifts energetically in our body, and we actually, it makes us feel better.
Yeah,
when
it's
you,
not a lie. Like,
Yeah.
I would do something like when I was
Yeah.
about to fight, I would smile. Not because I was happy, not because I was excited, but because I knew that smiling would trigger the emotions in my body that says, like, I'm safe, I'm good,
Yeah.
like, I'm ready for this, right? So if you saw me smiling, like, oh, this guy's like the happiest guy, like, before the fight, I was intense, but I
You're
was
in your
purposely
head,
smiling
yeah.
because we have these connections in our brain, right? Like, the brain and the body are so related. So when you smile, typically throughout your whole life, it's because you're happy, right? Like, you
Yeah.
wouldn't smile when you're sad. So if you smile first, regardless of how you feel, it tells your brain, I must be kind of happy right now. So even if you just sit
I'm in a
here,
place of calm.
yeah, so if you sit and you just smile, you're going to feel a little bit better, right? Just because of that association that we have between emotions and actions. So that faking it till you make it, something as simple as, I'm going to walk into the gym, but today I'm going to keep my chest up. I'm going to, like, have a smile on my face. I'm going to challenge myself. And you call it faking it, but in a way you're kind of making it true just by
embodying
acting it
yeah.
out. You're embodying it. And then that's sometimes I think that I try to get the point across to other people is, like, you can't just say I can only be confident once I achieve something. It's, you got to be confident first, then go out there and achieve it. So I think there's a lot of things that if we just flip the script, the equation kind of balances out the other
And
way.
I think it's kind of like that, if you look at it, like you hear this in theology or spirituality kind of practices, and you hear it in clinical as well, is like that capacity to, like, tune in and know that you are always going to be okay, right? Like, you got, like, that inner knowing, like you said at the beginning, like, you always knew you had something in you. So it's just standing in that no matter what storm or chaos or, experience or challenges around you, is that just embodied knowing that you have a capacity and you're going to show up with it no matter what happens, right?
Master Farah too, he had to talk to us, and he gave us a speech after one of the tournaments, and he said, listen, he said, there's infinite opportunities all around us. It's always falling, no matter where you go, we're surrounded by opportunities, but they're never going to fall into your hand. Everything that you want in life, you have to reach out and grab it. And I remember this speech because it meant a lot to me, and at the time, and it still does. It was like, it's true. There's all these things happening all around us, but it's never just going to fall into your hands. You have to actively reach out and make it happen. So it's like, that's the thing too. It's like, something I remind myself too is, like, what you want, you have to be, right? So if you want success, you have to be committed. You have to be disciplined. If you want happiness, then you have to be kind of like, you have to seek those things. You have to be grateful. You have to be positive. So it's like, what you want, you have to be.
You gotta do it.
And that's a good example of kind of flipping the script.
Dude, it
What
reminds
you
me-
want, you have to be.
Yeah, it reminds me of a joke I heard through like a Christian lens, where it's like, this person was always praying to win the lottery, and they're praying religiously every day, God, please let me win the lottery. And then one day this voice comes through and says, please just buy the ticket. Buy the ticket, man. Buy the
that's
ticket.
amazing.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's the thing. I think that's exactly what it is. You gotta take some action.
Yeah.
You can't sit in stillness.
You got to
right?
do it. You can't wait.
Yeah.
You can't wait until the stars align, and you
Yeah.
have to do it. And you have to do it as it stands, and go from there. Like, you have to accept that, like, I might not be perfect right away, but taking that first step will get you closer to the second. But it's like, imagine if you only started a diet once you had lost 5 pounds.
Right.
You're like, you
Right?
can't.
You
You
can't.
have to love that.
Right?
You know,
Yeah.
a lot of people say this, like, oh, he was just in the right place at the right time.
Yeah.
Or I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Whereas the truth is, it's like, success is opportunity means preparation, right? It's not being in the right place at the right
Yeah.
time or the wrong place at the wrong time. You got a lot more control over that. So
Yeah.
thanks, man. I mean, it's just amazing to hear the stories of not just your successes, but your success layered in with all the trials that you have. And, he's like 24.
I know.
This is the TaeKwonDo part of his journey.
Yeah.
There is then after this,
But
I
now
think,
he's harnessing all that
when
wisdom.
he gets to this point and he says again to himself there's more potential in me. And he goes again from the front of the pack to the back of the pack. And that's when he moved over into that world. But I'm going to save that for, like, I think there's another episode here that we're going to have to do with you. I hope you're willing.
Yeah.
You know, how did you find it, man? Like, coming out and what we're doing here, hopefully that's something that you see is worthwhile for you. What did you get out of it?
Yeah, it was great. I mean, it was cool to be able to talk kind of only about the origin stuff. A lot of times people kind of start with that as like a preface and then they go into the rest. And that's kind of what I was expecting too, even more like a 50-50 type of thing. But this was like 99%, like 100%, like just origin stuff, which was cool because I think, like you're saying, it sets the tone for people watching.